Hey guys, I'm back. I am going to play another segment of that guy's, one of that guy's videos who is basically exposing this cult for what it is and how they interplay on the god and the goddess. And I believe that most of us are cult stalked. And you guys know that I've had a couple different factions of people, like the Mormons, the Santeria people, the Catholics, all kinds of different groups have been after me. And they all tend to have the same kind of mythos, but with different names. And this guy goes in this video, he goes into how they're using how there's a ritual called like the Persephone ritual, where a woman is abducted by the cult, and which is basically what they've done with me. And they use radio frequencies on her and set her up to be killed and sacrificed by the cult. But until then, what they're doing is mind controlling her to do like I think it's called path work. I don't know. I'm going to play the video for you to hear. It's important though. And it talked about putting the person into a trance. And what's interesting is that he mentioned that there could be drum beats used to put the person into like a hypnotic trance. And what is interesting is Spartacus never had a problem with the dryer ever until we started to have break-ins into my house. And when did it start? It started all of a sudden, like if something like, you know how like in the dryer, if there's like a boom in the dryer, or if like the washing machine gets off kilter, it makes like a boom, boom, boom noise. He would freak out, and it would be really bad, like really, really bad. He would cry, he would shake, he would come up by me. I was thinking that they had put him in the washer or dryer or something. I didn't know. The way that he was terrified of it, you just assume. Someone tipped me off and said maybe it was drum beats that he was afraid of. And that made no sense to me at the time. But in hindsight, what's funny too is that when all this began, they were giving me a lot of references for like inner earth goddess. And I think I mentioned that in some other videos, how they were saying I was like an inner earth goddess. And I figured it had some kind of reptilian or a Gartha or something. No, it was Persephone, because she's a goddess of the underworld. And what's funny is that I had a cat named Persephone. So right now I'm going to play what that guy has to say about the Persephone ritual and the use of radio frequencies to mind control somebody, and basically how it all works. So here we go. I'm going to play that now.
All right, so continuing on with the quote, Sabin writes, "Some of the Wiccan mysteries are the interplay between the god and the goddess, and are mirrored in our Sabbath rites," end quote. Then she gives the example of the Greek myth about Persephone, or a lady who was abducted by the god Hades and brought into the underworld. So this may be an example of one of the ritual mysteries that got a little dangerous for a lady involved. A lady who was a target of the cult will play the role of Persephone. And in this ritual, she'll be chased and then abducted by an evil man who brings her as a prisoner into the underworld. So if you want to hear more about some of these mystery rituals, I have a video series called Saturnalia you can find on this channel that describes some of the interactive rituals or games that are played by the Wiccan cult. But one of the big secrets is that these people who become targets or victims of these rituals, where the cult stalks and manipulates them, is that these people are placed in a hypnotic state through the use of radio frequency energy fields.
Thank you.
And this essentially clouds their minds so that it's difficult for them to think rationally or clearly, and it's a lot like being on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So people become very frightened and are then traumatized and manipulated by the cult, who goes on to torture and kill most of these people.
Mm-hmm.
So in this book, Wicca for Beginners, you can plainly see that Wiccans are used to this radio frequency induced mental state under the section called Trance Meditation and Path Working in chapter 4. On pages 69 to 73, Sabin gives examples of certain exercises Wiccans can do to induce a trance. You can light a candle and stare at it. You can light incense, beat a drum. You can draw spirals. You could write, "I am in a trance" over and over again in a notebook. And you can imagine that you are in a maze with a minotaur. And then she suggests that you do something called square breathing exercises. And she writes that square breathing means that you breathe in for 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. So Sabin is telling you not only to hold your breath, but take about 6 breaths per minute, which is to breathe less than half the amount of times that would be considered.
Okay, really quick side note. What he goes into here, when I was in medical, in school for medical assisting in 2013, I found out that this was going on even back then. And my breathing, normal respiration is 16 to 20 beats per minute. Mine was always 10 to 12 a minute. My teacher used to watch me, and she said, she goes, even when you think I'm counting your respirations, and it's 10 to 12 a minute. She goes, you're like a vampire. My blood pressure was always 80/50, to the point where, or 80/60 sometimes, or 50, to the point that people were like, is she like a vampire? So it was every day we would practice our vitals on each other, and people thought they were messing up or reading it wrong, but they weren't. So what he goes into now talks about how the cult trains you. Well, apparently I would wake up in the morning, go to school, still under hypnosis, still under the fascinating. So, okay, here we go.
Normal and healthy. So unless you are taking very deep breaths, you would normally take about 20 breaths per minute. But in Wicca, they want you to hold your breath and only take 6 breaths per minute. And this will help put you in a trance. And then Sabin writes that during a trance, you may need to have someone come and check on you in your room if you fear that you may get lost in there. And that's a direct quote on page 69. So I guess in Wicca, people will often get lost in their rooms and need someone like a handler to come check on them from time to time, as if they're a little child. Yep. But that is the mental state the mystery cult prefers its little initiates to be in idiotic trances, where they need handlers to tell them what to do. Yep. Then on page 79 and 80, the author discusses what new Wiccans should learn how to do during your trances, and that is called path working. On page 79 and 80, she writes that during path working, which is a ritualistic journey that you will take while in a trance, Sabin worries about not being able to find herself out of it. So you may need to tie a mental thread to the door from where you started your mental journey, and then after it's over, you have to follow that thread back home. Then on page 83, Sabin basically exposes that something really messed up is happening on these path-working journeys. Yeah. And I will read what she writes. Quote, if you ever encounter anyone in your path-working, humans, gods, fairies, elves, animal spirits, ghosts, folklore characters, or any other beings, be polite. Don't touch or pet anything that doesn't want to be touched or petted. And if someone or something tells you to leave something alone, do so. And do not take anything that hasn't been specifically given to you. And when your journey is done, return to the starting point shift your consciousness back to the real world and ground. So this exposes that these are less imaginary characters in a daydream and more like other cult members that are taking the mind control victim on a walk.
What have I been saying?
And these handlers don't want you to misbehave or be anything other than polite to them. And you shouldn't take anything back with you, like evidence of what has happened.
Yeah.
On page 86, she describes one of these ritual trips where the path worker is brought to the edge of a thick forest at night. Saban explains that there's a full moon and a path leading into the woods with a tower of stones nearby. You walk into the forest, down a path, and into a large clearing where there's a flat stone that you should sit on. Then a lady in a flowing white dress appears and walks across the field, and you should know to wait for her and not be afraid because she has information for you. However, as part of the ritual programming, you cannot identify who that person is. Then Saban writes this statement that exposes what the cult wants on page 87. Note, whatever happens in the clearing is the work of the path working, and the parts where you walk the path to and from the clearing are meant to bring you in and out of the trance. So do you know what she's saying with all of that? She is telling you to go into a trance before you reach the field, so you do not exactly remember what happens out there.
Yeah.
And then when you are leaving the field, then you could come back out of your trance. So they're teaching their initiates, as well as any person they want to become a victim, to fall into a trance and walk out into a field at night with other people and then block out whatever happens out there.
Yep.
So the field could be a place of some obscene ritual involving sex and death, and people could get raped or killed or programmed to do that sort of thing on others.
Yep.
All right, the Wiccan Sabbats. Let's talk a little bit about their Wiccan Sabbath days that they called Sabbats. There are 8 Wiccan holidays, and the head Wiccans will lie and say that they are worshiping the seasons and the cycle of the year. But this is all a cover and a way for Wiccans to tell you next to nothing about what these ritual days are really about. The truth is that Wicca, like many religions,
we'll carry on with this.
is a sun cult, such as the Roman Catholic Church. So here's the Wiccan Wheel of Death. So they use the wheel to symbolize that they have 8 ritual holidays. 4 holidays are devoted to the cycles of the sun, and 4 holidays are devoted to the cycles of the moon. And that means that they practice ritual sacrifice on certain days that have to do with the cycles of the sun and the moon. So they have a wheel with 8 spokes that represent the 8 holidays practiced throughout the year. So I will first explain a little bit about the cycle of the sun concerning what is called the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the spring equinox, and the fall equinox. And on December 21st is the winter solstice. And all the winter solstice means is that this is the day of the year with the shortest amount of daylight and the longest night. So there are 2 solstices every year, the winter solstice and then the summer solstice, and they are opposites. On the winter solstice, there's the shortest day but the longest night, and on the summer solstice, there's the longest day but the shortest night. And then there are the 2 equinoxes in the spring and the fall. And all that means is on both of these days, there is an equal amount of daytime and nighttime. Now, I've read many sources concerning Wiccan holidays, and no one explains the belief concerning the solstices too clearly. In fact, the entire religion of Wicca is purposely clouded so no one could understand what these degenerates are up to. But the Wiccans have a deity called the sun god, and that is an important figure on their Sabbath days. So the Wiccan sun god is born on the winter solstice, and that is the day with the least amount of daylight and the most night. And after the winter solstice, since the days start to get longer and we get more daylight, that is symbolized by the sun god being born and then growing. So the sun god grows until the next solstice, the summer solstice, where there's the longest amount of daylight but the shortest night. And then after the summer solstice, since the days start to get shorter and the nights get longer, that is symbolized by the sun god dying. So the sun god shines the longest on the summer solstice and then dies after that, because then the days start to get shorter. So the short days continue up to the next solstice, the winter solstice. And Wiccans will call this the dark half of the year, from the end of June up through the end of December. Then on the winter solstice, we have the shortest day, where the sun god is born again. And then the days start to get longer after he is born. And so Wiccans will say that we are entering into the light half of the year, from the end of December to the end of June. So this is why the Roman Catholic Church celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ around the end of December, because the Catholic Church is an undercover pagan church and is really celebrating the Yule season. Now, this is another aspect to Wicca that seems to be deliberately mixed up on purpose. Even though they tell you that you can worship any pagan gods in Wicca, they actually have four main gods, and they are the sun god and the moon goddess, who you will find out are the good guys. Mm-hmm. And then there is the nature god and the earth goddess,
this is important,
who you will find out are the bad guys. So according to the Wiccan myth, they say that on the winter solstice, the earth goddess gives birth to the sun god. Then on the spring equinox, since they are an equal age, the earth goddess has sex with the sun god and then gives birth to him 9 months later on the next winter solstice. But this is wrong. The goddess who they should be talking about is the moon goddess, not the earth goddess, because the moon goddess represents nighttime. So this is very important, because the sun represents daytime and the moon represents nighttime. So of course, the day and the night are equal length on the spring solstice, and that is symbolized in Wicca by the sun god and the moon goddess being equals and mating. And the sun has often been known in many religions to represent the male god, and the moon has often been known to represent the female god. So I find a lot of sources with strange and contradictory facts about the Wiccan religion, especially on the internet, that all seem to be aimed at misleading people, so nobody on the outside of their little mystery religion figures out what the Wiccan religion is really about. And that is, under the cycles of the sun and moon, the Wiccans play strange ritualistic games involving the manipulation of people, sex, and death. And the individuals who the Wiccans manipulate, torture, and kill are called the sun god and the moon goddess. Those are like titles the cult will give to their victims. So that is what they'll call you when you become targets of the Wiccan cult. So there has been millions of people who have been called the sun god and the moon goddess. They are also called kings and queens. And the cult hates these good people, and they want to torture them and tear their lives apart and then kill them in horrible ways in front of the coven.
Yep, they do.
Meanwhile, the Wiccans call themselves the earth goddesses and the nature gods. Those are roles that they'll play. And the earth goddess is often represented by a fat woman in the shape of planet Earth. And the nature god is often represented by the Baphomet figure, the goat-headed guy, or a guy dressed up in green. The nature god is also represented by the green man.
Okay, so his video just ended. Yeah. So I did an earlier video with his divine king and queen where he describes that whole process. But yeah, this is a pretty important video if you're cult stalked. This man is a genius. He's the real deal, because I've been living this every day. And the things that he said made complete sense. And actually, it was things that I had seen happen. So, but yeah, I'm getting hit right now in the heart. So, all right, well, I'll let you guys go. Hope you enjoy this. Bye.